Kyle Busch and his contract rumors. Where is he going to land in 2023? It's going to be an interesting battle between, it seems, a two-horse race between RCR and 2311 Racing. Of course, we think Colleague Racing could be still in that mix, but all reports indicate from Adam Stern and other sources that it's coming down to RCR and 2311 Racing. Of course, a Chevrolet team and a Toyota team. It's a completely switch. It's a totally different dynamic between the two teams. They're no way comparable. 2311, a startup, RCR, one of the legendary teams in the sport. There's a lot of different ways that this could go. It seems like RCR could be the slight favorite, if anything, right now, but I'm pretty darn sure that there's nothing been put pen to paper for Kyle Busch for next season as of yet. So there's a lot of debate here. And I think before the news becomes official, Kyle, I really wanted to break this down with you before the news comes out, because I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. I'd be interested to know what Kyle Busch's mind is obviously feeling right now. But if you were Kyle Busch right now, Kyle, where would you be leaning towards and why?
So that's a fantastic question because there's pros and cons to all the different places that he could go, whether it's RCR 2311, which according to Adam Stern and his latest reporter are the two front runners right now, but also for some of the teams that we've also heard mentioned in Stuart Haas and Colleague Racing as well.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on what he wants, whether it's short-term championship potential or long-term championship potential, because I think those could be two different scenarios to look for in terms of where you want to go, but also what you want to do into the future, whether you want to be an owner into the future, what you want to do with your truck series team into the future, all these different things. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different pros and cons weighing on Kyle Busch going into what he's going to decide. So for RCR and just because that I think right now seems to be the front runner, all things considered. I don't love that as a landing spot, to be honest, just because we kind of see Tyler Reddick and what he's done right now in terms of being able to run up front at certain ovals, be a strong guy on road courses, be able to be in contention for wins and things like that. But overall, I don't think that they are quite the championship contender, at least at this point, that we could see from some of the other teams that are interested in Kyle Busch at the very least. So of the two front runners, I do think 2311 Racing is the better fit. But I do think that the 2311 option is depending on what happens with Kyle or with Kurt Busch, excuse me, if he does race next year, if they open up a third seat. There's a lot of different things up in the air regarding what would happen with 2311, whereas with RCR, it's pretty clearly that he would slide into that Reddick seat and Reddick would either move to 2311 early or would just sit on the sidelines for a year or something like that. So in terms of 2311 and why I think that they're a better option than RCR, I think we've seen them have a better upward trajectory from where they've been since they've started to where they are now. We saw this year with them adding Kurt Busch and things like that, them being contention for wins, actually win a race with Kurt Busch, of course, the track that we're going to this weekend at Kansas. And we saw them really take that step from team trying to figure it out last year to team that is in contention at certain tracks. The next step, of course, would be to find that consistency, be a team that can be top 10 in regular season points and contend for a championship. And I think they're on that trajectory right now. And so for Kyle Busch, I think of those two front runners, 2311 is the spot that I'd prefer over RCR, but SHR is still there. We see what they're able to do with Kevin Harvick recently in their resurgence. Of course, Kevin Harvick probably not going to be there after next year or 2 years. They'll be looking for a team leader. That's a strong place to go that has championship pedigree. And Colleague Racing, there are a few owners in the sport that have as much money as Matt Colleague, and he's serious about racing. So if you want somebody or to go somewhere that has long-term aspirations of being a championship contender that could support your truck series team and stuff like that, I do think Colleague is a decent option as well. So there's a lot of different things at play here for Kyle Busch, but of the front runners, of the teams mentioned, I do think 2311 is the best spot, but I do still think that RCR is probably the more likely scenario right now.
It's fascinating, really. I mean,
It really
I
is.
never would have thought looking back at when the M&M's announcement happened that we would be in this position. It's a really, really interesting place that Kyle Busch is in. I'm not a fan of it. It's definitely increased my my blood my blood and my blood pressure and everything under the sun. Like, it's just been an emotional year in general. As a Kyle Busch fan, I think everybody can attest to that. But I'm mixed on it. I don't know, because it would be so weird in a way if he were to go to 2311 Racing, the sister team to Joe Gibbs Racing. In a way, a lot of the same resources, a lot of it shared technology. Does he want to stay in the Toyota kind of pipeline, or, you know, in that manufacturer, while he just kind of got the boot from JGR? Will he feel comfortable enough going over to a sister team, if you will, like, and get that sponsorship from 2311 when Joe Gibbs Racing couldn't really offer him that? I feel like that's going to be a really interesting decision if he does end up taking that. Of course, I think both teams are going to add a third car in case this happens, whether that's Tyler Reddick maybe coming over to 2311 Racing and Kyle taking a third car, or if Kurt Busch could come back. I think that Kyle will slot in right alongside his brother. And then Tyler Reddick is still under contract for 2023 with RCR, so I don't really see him jumping the gun a year early at the moment. I think if he goes to RCR, they're going to add a third car, and then they look at maybe something like Sheldon Creed or Austin Hill eventually there to maybe slide into that third seat, or maybe look elsewhere in a year or two.
My only thing with that is, where are they getting that charter? And where
I
are
think
they
people
getting
are in the
money
market
to?
for charters, though. Like,
People are in the market, but where are they getting the money to buy that charter as well?
it's a good question. I don't know the ins and outs necessarily of like all the business, but I would assume that there could be a deal in place to buy a $20 million charter from, you know, Starcom, or, you know, a Rick Racing, or
charter's gone.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
My point being, for those teams, I think 2311 is the more likely to buy a charter, but I just don't really see a scenario where it makes sense for RCR to bring in a big name free agent and Kyle Busch, somehow find the sponsorship and make up the funds to buy a 20 million charter all at the same time, when your other big name driver is about to leave as well. That's the only part for me. But
fair enough. I just saw a report that it looks like they could get a third.
I'm sure they're talking about
it.
it. I just don't know how likely it is.
Fair enough. Like, for me, I don't like any of the options really for Kyle Busch, to be honest. I think that they are middle of the road teams that I don't know if they're really in that top echelon. I would look at Penske, JGR, and Hendrick, right? Those, I think we can establish, are really the three. And then you have some big name guys at some other teams, but they're not well-rounded enough like those three top teams, where they're consistent, they have the resources, and they're just out and out championship contenders, it seems, every single season. Like, ideally, when you look at Martin Truex Jr.'s contract situation right now, he's signed a 1-year deal, right? He's coming back for 2023. He's likely gone at the end of next season, depending on how things go. We'll see if he re-ups for another 1 year. You know, he could just keep on doing 1-year contracts until he feels like he's done. But if that's two JGR guys out, Ty Gibbs is going to take that 18 car for next season. And then you're losing Martin Truex Jr. Where are you going to go for that extra car? It's going to be fascinating to see. Could very well be. But I don't know if it makes sense for Kyle Busch to necessarily stay in the Toyota frame, if you will. It's probably the easier option when you look at KBM. You're staying with the trucks. You don't have to worry about switching over. It's just essentially the body type for that. It doesn't really have too much of an effect if you switch from, you know, the interior stuff and everything. It's more about the drivers that really comes down to KBM. It's not necessarily the actual manufacturer. It comes down to who's contracted under Toyota, who's contracted with Chevrolet. I think Ford is a very outside shot right now with Stewart-Haas Racing. It doesn't seem like that's going to be going anywhere. So my vision that I had when I texted you that, I don't think that's going to be coming to fruition, but, I don't know. It's because from everything that I've heard from him, from Kyle, that is, that there, you know, there's a lot of different things that go into this decision that most guys don't ever have to deal with. And I think that's what's, you know, prolonged this entire experience for him. So overall, it's just been a complete mess from, you know, how I think everything's handled. Like, you know, TRD wants to keep Kyle Busch, you know, like they said at Daytona, this is their 60 home run hitter. Like, this is the guy that is really, he's the guy that's gotten them the 2 championships. You know, you look at Martin Truex Jr., of course, winning that championship in 2017, but he's the only JGR guy that's won a championship since Toyota's come into the sport. So they're losing a big guy here. And if they lose him entirely, it would be a massive blunder, in my opinion, by both Toyota and JGR to not be able to sell Kyle Busch, one of the more I'd say a top 3 notable name in the sport that's marketable, maybe for the wrong reasons at times. But
well, I think what we're seeing right now is that he's not necessarily marketable.
For his
He
pay
said as
salary,
much.
which he's earned, right?
Well,
Like, if he
no.
didn't
That his salary has nothing to do with whether he's marketable or not. He said as much that his reputation has made it difficult to get new sponsors on board.
yes, but you're trying to find a sponsor that covers that salary, right? Or tries to cover it for the
but that doesn't change what he wants salary wise doesn't impact whether he's marketable or not. As a sport, it's good to have a Kyle Busch because it makes the week to week certain comments, stuff like that, more interesting, more entertaining. But Kyle Busch as an individual driver, I don't think is as marketable as you're making it out to be. And I think
probably
we're seeing,
not, and I'm biased, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and I think the reason why he's finding so much trouble finding a sponsor that is big enough, that is willing to take on enough, is kind of a result of kind of the reputation that he has. Mars and M&M's gave him a lot of leash to kind of do whatever you want, say whatever you want, and it's kind of coming back to bite him, the reputation that he has.
Yeah, and this is a pivotal point in his career. I think wherever he lands, that's likely one of, if not the last spot he goes in his Cup Series career. He's trying to find his.
It depends how long he signs for. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Like if he signs a 1 or 2 year deal, I could see him going somewhere else if another big seat opens up at that time.
If I'm Kyle Busch, I mean, I've talked to you about this.
It's not going to happen. Like you can keep trying to put it out there. It's never going to happen.
I think the ideal spot for him would be that 48 car.
It's never going to happen.
I probably won't. But if they were to sign like a 1 year deal, Bowman's at a contract at the end of next season. Is there any way?
Hendrick won't pay that much to get another big name driver in. They did have 4 big name ticket driver things in the past. They had 2 championship quality guys and 2 guys that were marketable, but didn't have the results to go with it. And Dale Jr., Casey Kane, we saw them go away from that model to go for young drivers over the past handful of years. It's worked better for them. They're going to have 2 big name drivers on big contracts in the near future, and Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, William Byron might be in that kind of progressing up the grid to warrant a bigger contract, stuff like that. So I just can't see Hendrick going for another big name driver for a big money signing when they've kind of been there, done that before.
But nobody's Kyle Busch in that situation. I will argue that. Like, none of those names that when they
what
had
is
their
Kyle
big
Busch
four,
bringing that they don't already have at that team?
well, I mean, he's better than Bowman, but like at the end of the day, like,
but that's not the point.
If they wanted a well-rounded 4, they would go to.
But the
Kyle
point
Busch,
is that they don't need that anymore. They tried that and it didn't work.
It's just what I think would be the best fit for him to go back to Hendrick Motorsports.
Yeah,
I think anywhere else.
It's going to be the best team, the best car, stuff like that. I just don't think it's a realistic scenario.
Probably not. But I think that it would just make more sense to me than going to RCR with an owner that he's had problems with in the past, which they've reconciled.
It would
publicly.
make more sense, but it's with the options that you have, right?
Yeah, and that's why I think that they're all kind of like not his ideal choice, and that's why it's taken so long. If he had if they had a name that popped off the table that really grabbed his attention, we would have probably found this out in July. This contract stuff would have been done, but there's been so much. It's so even between, you can't really decipher between who could look good. I mean, RCR hasn't been this competitive in years with race winning abilities consistently when you have a guy like Tyler Reddick in there. I mean, it's back to the Kevin Harvick days when he was there, when RCR was, a championship threat.
Yep. I
mean, I have Tyler Reddick winning the championship this season. So, you never know if he wants to go to a championship winning based off my predictions. But 23-11, they're still finding their groove. They haven't quite gone off to the hottest start compared to Trackhouse, who came in at the same time as them, but you never know. And the thing that RCR definitely does is they have the engine alliance with Hendrick and Trackhouse. So there is a bit of a kind of alliance, if you will, between the 3 teams. It's not Hendrick Motorsports equipment, but there is still a little bit of an affiliation between that. I wonder what the selling point is for RCR for coming there. I think it would throw NASCAR Nation insane if Kyle Busch went there driving a number 8, a number 3, a number 88, anything like that along those lines for Kyle Busch, I think would throw NASCAR fandom in pandemonium. But I'm interested to see where he goes. Obviously, I'm biased with that. I need to know where he goes, but it's just fascinating that it's taken this long and that there's those are his options. And that's just basically the way the market is right now. And I can't believe that the NASCAR market is in this state where you cannot find a guy or a sponsor to sign a guy like Kyle Busch, or find that it would be profitable to partner with a guy like Kyle Busch after how many wins. He's the only two-time champion on the grid at the moment. You know, this is one of the premier names the NASCAR has turned out in the past 15 years. So
part of it is the context, though, right? Like if JGR didn't have Ty Gibbs coming up, who was the premier prospect, name, everything like that, who had decent results so far in 23XI, but is the guy coming up for Joe Gibbs Racing, then something probably gets figured out. And if Kyle Busch doesn't have as many bridges burned that he has at certain teams and stuff like that, it probably gets figured out quicker as well. So it's not just quite that there's a big name driver who's excellent, has results and stuff like that, that's on the open market and can't find a team. There's some other context there as well that is why he's in this situation. But yeah, it's racing. It's not the same as stick and ball sports where the sponsors aren't the main source of income, where you try to get the best team possible. It's not quite like that. And for Kyle Busch, the results have slipped over the last couple of years. He is the big ticket driver commanding a big salary. If you can't quite get those sponsors to cover it as well, there's a lot of risk involved potentially if it's a long-term contract and stuff like that as well. So yeah, I really hope we get a resolution to this soon, because it is the big kind of story going into next season. And once it gets solved, then it becomes what happens with charters, what happens with his performance next year. There's a ton of
he's the first
really interesting things to kind of follow suit as well.
He knows it, right? He's publicly admitted that I have to be the first one to go, to state where I'm going, and then everything else will kind of fall in place from there.
To be fair, there isn't a ton that kind of follows suit depending on where he goes. Like if it's a team that's adding a charter, then it's just Ty Gibbs goes into the 18 and that's kind of done with. I think if he goes to an RCR, if he does slide into the 8 car, then there could be some kind of ramifications if Reddick gets let go early and stuff like that.
Yeah, there could be a trickle down effect that is bigger than what we're thinking right now. It could be smaller than what we're thinking right now. It could be, just like you said, as simple as Ty Gibbs taking that 18 and Kyle goes to a 3rd car, and then everything else will kind of sort itself out from there. But it's short-sighted from JGR, in my opinion, to be losing Kyle Busch like this when you've got, arguably a guy in Ty Gibbs that's going to be, the face of that team for the next 20 years. There's no beating around the bush of that, but you're losing the guy that has brought you the most success out of probably anybody that's ever been in your team. So it is quite strange to me thinking that's
probably,
happened,
but you could make an argument for a couple other guys, but
probably. But I would say in this modern era here where it's pretty difficult to win with the playoff system and stuff, that Kyle Busch has got it twice.
Well, no, I know. I'm saying like you can make an argument
and he's
for
filtered their entire prospect pipeline. Like it goes down much further than just his cup level results, right?
I mean, you could say that, but how many of those prospects have actually gotten to JGR? That's part of
Christopher Bell's in there right now.
I know. My point being is like there's a couple guys and one of them ended up getting punted as well. So part of this process is that they've got young guys coming up, and that you got to kind of bring the young guys in eventually. And it's just that this is the unfortunate situation for Kyle Busch where the sponsor leaves, you have a guy that's ready to take the seat. And would you rather spend the big money to bring Kyle Busch back when he's had some decent but kind of up and down results over the last couple of years, or bring Ty Gibbs in now, give him this flagship car and have veteran drivers around him to help support him in the process as well? It's a crappy situation for Kyle Busch, but the unfortunate reality for Joe Gibbs is that it probably makes the most sense to bring Ty Gibbs in now in that 18 car and have Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. there to support him in the process.
Yeah, it's just the worst timing if you're Kyle Busch that the grandson of your team owner is ready for Cup, and it's the flagship number that you've got, and you're out of contract and you got no sponsor. If he had a sponsor for next season, this would have been done and dusted. There would be an extension.
Well, if he had a sponsor, then it would be Ty Gibbs taking over a car next, for 2024 then. But it's not the situation, and kind of context is key here. And it's kind of the crappy situation that Kyle Busch finds himself in.